Welcome to Miami Dolphins Today by Chat Sports. On today's show, we are going to have an uncomfortable conversation about the direction of this team and what needs to change in order for Miami to flip the script and not lose the game like they did on Thursday and win deep into January, beat good teams, and win potentially postseason games, because it has been a long time since the Dolphins were able to win a playoff game, and it has been time after time after time again where this organization and team goes up into a big game and absolutely crumbles and just gets bullied, gets physically outplayed on a nightly basis in these big games. We've seen it against the Bills. We saw it against the Packers. We saw it against the Chiefs last year. And I'm sick and tired of seeing it just happen over and over again. And I think there is some things that need to change in order for this not to happen. But before we get into those things, make sure you are subscribed to the channel, because we are still dropping daily content on this team. We will be live for the final 5 games of the season, and hey, maybe if they win all 5, we'll be live for a 6th game. But either way, we'll have you covered every single day on the Miami Dolphins. All right. When you think about what has gone wrong for this team, really over the past 4 years, but you can just lump in 2 decades worth of this if we're going to be honest, is that they are a finesse team that when it gets into a tough playoff environment in cold weather, because guess what? Unless you have home field advantage or playing in a dome, you're going to have to play outside in cold weather, especially in the AFC, going to Baltimore, to Pittsburgh, to Buffalo, to Kansas City. And this team just constantly gets outplayed. And some of the reasons why that is because they are a soft football team, and I think it starts with the roster construction, but it also starts with their head coach. And we're going to dive into Mike McDaniel later a bit, but I want to talk about the roster right now, because I think, could sum this up to a perfect T just by down 16, 9.5 minutes to go against the Packers. It's 2nd and goal at the 1. You run a power right. No good blocking from Kendall Lamb in the right side of that offensive line, stuffed at the 1-yard line. And then you run a play-action bootleg. Too much pressure for Tua. He couldn't lay it out for Jonnu Smith. Maybe it was PI. That's a different conversation, but it doesn't matter. Incomplete. And then the 4th down call was absolutely abysmal. It stood absolutely no chance to get that 4th and goal from the 1, and you had to turn it over, and that essentially was the game. Why isn't Jeff Wilson or Raheem Mostert in? But that's a different conversation. But the issue at hand here is that their offensive line is not physical enough at the point of attack to move opposing teams' defensive line off the ball so they can run in those tight quarter situations. And it's been the neglection of Chris Grier at the offensive guard position. Listen, I understand you were in a tough spot in terms of cap space, but letting Robert Hunt go was an absolute train wreck of a decision. You should have done everything in your power to try to keep Robert Hunt at right guard, because he was so good last year, and it was part of the reason why the Dolphins' rushing attack was so good. Raheem Mostert was so good in between the tackles and had 21 total touchdowns last season. You should not have let him go. And then the left guard and right guard situation now is Liam Eichenberg and Robert Jones. You have 2 below average offensive guards on the interior, and you constantly get bullied. You cannot run inside the tackles right now, and especially when you get inside the 5, the 10-yard line, when you really have to rely on the run game, because speed can only get you so far, and because it's close quarters, the threat of getting beat deep isn't there, so you need to be able to be running in between the tackles or have a physical wide receiver that can go high point of football. The Dolphins don't have the wide receiver aspect. Their offensive line isn't physical enough, and it's the reason why this team struggles to score in the red zone when they get inside the 5 against other teams that are physically gifted. And that needs to change. The offensive line is the number one thing that needs to be addressed this offseason. And we can make the argument that Chris Grier is not fit to make that change, because he has neglected that part of this team for the past 5 years. The trade for Bradley Chubb was nice. The trade for Tyreek Hill was nice. But some mistakes were just made over and over again, and I don't think Chris Grier is the man for the job. Unfortunately, I think he's in there with Stephen Ross, the owner of the Dolphins, and I think that it's a tough conversation to be had because Grier's been in this organization for so long. And you also have to have the conversation, if you do fire Chris Grier, are you firing Mike McDaniel as well, which we'll talk about coach in just a second. But Chris Grier failing to have this offensive line be improved or at least stay the same, especially on the interior, is the reason why this team constantly struggles in cold weather environments on the offensive side of the football. There's other issues though as well. The secondary depth is horrible. Cam Smith isn't good. You're relying on Storm Duck to play. He's not good. And the safety position is absolutely atrocious. I thought this was going to be a good group this year. I was wrong. Hand up, I can admit when I was wrong, because this safety tandem has been horrible. Jevon Holland has regressed every single year of his career since his rookie season, and I'm going to say this right now, and I don't think it's going to change. Unless he plays like an all-pro in the final 5 games of the year, I am not going to pay Jevon Holland. He is going to look for $18 million probably per year. He's one of the top free agents this offseason, which tells you how weak of a class it is. I would not bring him back. I would rather free up cap space and use the money you would think about bringing Jevon Holland back with to improve this offensive line on the interior and grab other positions, like a backup quarterback for once in this team's history with Tua there. So I'm letting Jevon Holland walk. He has regressed every year. Jordan Poyer is an absolute travesty to the game of football. Maybe this 6th-round rookie, Patrick McMorris, ultimately ends up becoming something, and maybe you rely on him and give him a shot next year. But either way, the tandem of Jevon Holland and Jordan Poyer cannot be back next season. They are terrible. And meanwhile, you got Deshaun Elliott and Brandon Jones playing well elsewhere. Before we continue with today's video, let me know if you guys think Chris Grier should be fired. Type Y for yes or type N for no. It's today's pinned comment on today's video. But that's not the only issue here. We mentioned the wide receiver part. This team has speed, yes, but speed can only take you so far. You need to have good physical football players that know how to play the game. You just see them constantly on offense try to get open. The speed is there, but they don't have enough time to throw it. And then when you try to get in those close quarters environments on the offensive end, it doesn't work. Like, it is a legit issue in terms of roster construction. You need to get a backup quarterback for once. You need to revamp the safety room. You need to get more cornerback depth. You need to add a lengthy physical wide receiver on the outside to complement Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. And that is just some minuscule stuff off the top of my head right now. But the issue that we're going to focus on right now is Mike McDaniel, because there is an argument to be made that he should be potentially on the outs after this season. Why, you ask that? Well, maybe you didn't ask that, but I'm going to tell you why I think so. Because this team can't beat good football teams. They can't. They are the ultimate front-running football team there is. And in the last 10 games against 500 football teams or better, the Dolphins are 1-9. 1-9. They simply cannot beat good football teams. It's a legit issue. And this team just has a front-running mentality, and it stems from your coaching staff. I like Mike McDaniel's personality. I think he's a great guy. I think he is a brilliant offensive mind. But the fact is this: when you stack him up against other good football coaches and good football teams, he constantly gets out-coached. Sean McDermott, Andy Reid, Matt LaFleur, Kyle Shanahan. It does not matter. When McDaniel goes up against a good team, his Dolphins football teams shrivel up. They do. And sure, they have a couple good wins, Cowboys, Bills over the last couple of seasons, but look at this year, for example. They're 5-0 against teams that stink. 5-0. They're 0-3 against winning football teams. Buffalo twice, or 0-4 now. Buffalo twice, Arizona, and Green Bay. Like, what are we doing here? It's so obvious that this team can't beat good football teams, and I think that stems from your coaching staff, not having your team ready to play, having a terrible mindset. I like that this culture in Miami is player-friendly. I like that players want to play here because they like the weather, they like the culture in the locker room, they like the coaching staff. That's all fun and games, but if it comes down to winning football games, I don't think Mike McDaniel might be the guy for the job. He's a great offensive mind, But do we have the confidence in him to go out there and get this team ready to play in big-time environments and big-time games? If you do, let me know down in the comments section, because I don't. And you could point to the offense as well a little bit. Like, the offense is fun, it's awesome, it's fine at times, but the issue is that it never adapts. It doesn't. It is the offense that Mike McDaniel runs. It doesn't matter if it's 3rd and 15, 3rd and 5, 4th and inches, 3rd and inches. The Dolphins offense is going to be the same offense at all times. Quick, RPO, agile, speed, beat you on the perimeter. And in order to win games, and I want to keep on bringing this back to this point, in these late weather playoff type atmospheres, you need to be able to trust your team to pick up yardage in short situations and be a physical team in the trenches. They are not a physical team on the defensive line. They are not a physical team on the offensive line. They are a finesse speed team. And that is all fun and games in September and October. But when it gets to late November, December, and January, when meaningful football is played at its peak, this offense is simply not built to be sustained because of its lack of ability to run in between the tackles and move opposing teams' front four off of their spot to free up running lanes. This Dolphins team came into this Packers game averaging 77 yards on the game in their last 3 weeks against the Rams, Raiders, and Patriots. And that only went down because they only ran for 39 yards, like on 14 carries. It was not good. Like, they can't run it. And I don't know if it's the offense, the lack of offensive line. I think it's a combination of both. But if the Dolphins want to turn around and become a serious franchise in terms of winning games when it matters most, they need to start to change their philosophy. Whether that is getting rid of Chris Grier and bringing in a new GM who has a different way of building a team that's more physical, or whether it's moving off of Mike McDaniel and bringing in a head coach that will have his team prepared and ready to play in these big games. Something needs to change, though. And that's going to do it for today's show. Make sure you are subscribed, like I said. Let me know what your thoughts are on what I said. I want to hear what you guys have to say. Do you think I'm crazy for saying that the Dolphins need to move off Chris Grier and think about moving off of Mike McDaniel and the issues that this team has? Or do you think everything's fine and they're going to figure it out eventually? I didn't even talk about Tagovailoa today. I just talked about from the GM, the organization, the coaching staff, and why this philosophy won't work. But let me know your thoughts down below. I'll see you with another video tomorrow. Go Fins.